I've missed you." And so he went to bed with a million self-hating thoughts chanting in unison in his mind, and he lay there in his bed in the Flophouse Hotel for hours, listening to the thoughts and the shouting bums and clubgoers and the people having sex in other rooms and the music floating up from car windows, for hours and hours, and he'd barely fallen asleep when his alarm woke him up. He showered and scraped off his little butt-fluff mustache with a disposable razor and ate a peanut butter sandwich and made himself a quadruple espresso using the nitrous-powered hand press he'd bought with his first paycheck and called a cab and brushed his teeth while he waited for it. The cabbie was Chinese, and Wei Dong asked him, in his best Mandarin, to take him down to Orange County, to his parents' place. The man was clearly amused by the young white boy who spoke Chinese, and they talked a little about the weather and the traffic, and then Wei Dong slept, dozing with his rolled-up jacket for a pillow, sleeping through the caffeine jitter of the quad shot as the early morning LA traffic crawled down the 5. And he paid the cabbie nearly a day's wages and took his keys out of his jacket pocket and walked up the walk to his house and let himself in, and his mother was sitting at the kitchen table in her housecoat, eyes red and puffy, just staring into space. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and she looked back at him, then stood uncertainly and crossed to him and gave him a hug that was tight and trembling, and there was wetness on his neck where her tears streaked it. He went, she breathed into his ear. "This morning, about 3 a.m. Another heart attack. Very fast. They said it was practically instant." She cried some more. And Wei Dong knew that he would be moving home again. The hospital discharged Big Sister Noor and the mighty Krang and Justbob 2 days early, just to be rid of them. For one thing, they wouldn't stay in their rooms. Instead, they kept sneaking down to the hospital's cafeteria where they'd commandeer 3 or 4 tables, laboriously pushing them together, moving on crutches and wheelchairs, then spreading out computers. Phones. Notepads, macrame projects. Tiny lead miniatures that the mighty Krang was always painting with fine camel hair brushes, cards, flowers, chocolates and shortbread sent by Webley supporters. To top it off, Big Sister Noor had discovered that 3 of the women on her ward were Filipina maids who'd been beaten by their employers, and was holding consciousness-raising meetings where she taught them how to write official letters of complaint to the Ministry of Manpower. The nurses loved them, they'd voted in a union the year before, and the hospital administration hated them with the white-hot heat of 1,000 suns. So less than 2 weeks after being beaten within an inch of their lives, Big Sister Noor, the mighty Krang, and Justbob stepped, blinking, into the choking heat of midday in Singapore, wrapped in bandages, splints and casts. Their bodies were broken, but their spirits were high. The beating had been, well, liberating. After years of living in fear of being jumped and kicked half to death by goons working for the bosses. They'd been through it and survived. They'd thrived. Their fear had been burned out. As they looked at one another, hair sticky and faces flushed from the steaming heat, they began to smile. Then to giggle. Then to laugh, as loud and as deep as their injuries would allow. Justbob swept her hair away from the eye patch that covered the ruin of her left eye, scratched under the cast on her arm, and said, "They should have killed us." Part 3. Ponzi. This scene is dedicated to the Harvard Bookstore, a wonderful and eclectic bookshop in the heart of one of the all-time kick-ass world-class bookshopping neighborhoods, the stretch of Mass Avenue that runs between Harvard and MIT. The last time I visited the store, they'd just gotten in an espresso print-on-demand book machine that was hooked up to Google's astonishing library of scanned public domain books, and they could print and bind practically any out-of-print book from the whole of human history for a few dollars in a few minutes. To plumb the unimaginable depths of human creativity this represented, the store had someone whose job it was to just mouse around and find wild titles from out of history to print and stick on the shelves around the machine. I have rarely felt the presence of the future so strongly as I did that night. Harvard Bookstore. 1256 Massachusetts Avenue. Cambridge, Massachusetts, 02138 USA. +1 617 661 1515. The inside of the shipping container was a lot worse than Wei Dong had anticipated. When he'd decided to smuggle himself into China, he'd done a lot of reading on the subject, starting with searches on human trafficking, which was all horror stories about 130-degree noontimes in a roasting box, crammed in with 30 others. And then into the sustainable housing movement, where architects were vying to outdo one another in their simple and elegant retrofits of containers into cute little apartments. Why no one had thought to merge the two disciplines was beyond him. If you're going to smuggle people across the ocean, why not avail yourself of a cute little kit to transform their steel box into a cozy little camper? Was he missing something? Nope. Other than the fact that people smugglers were all criminal dirtbags, he couldn't find any reason why a smuggler couldn't enjoy the 10 days at sea in high style. Especially if the smuggler was now co-owner of a huge shipping and logistics company based in Los Angeles, with the run of the warehouse and a Homeland Security all-access pass for the port. It had taken Wei Dong 3 weeks to do the work on the container. The mail-order conversion kit said that it could be field assembled by 2 unskilled laborers in a disaster area with hand tools in 2 days. It took him 2 weeks, which was a little embarrassing, as he'd always classed himself as skilled, but there you go. And he had special needs, after all. He'd read up on port security and knew that there'd be sensors looking for the telltale cocktail of gases given off by humans: acetone, isoprene, alpha-pinene, and lots of other exotic exhaust given off with every breath in a specific ratio. So he built a little container inside the container, an airtight box that would hold his gases in until they were at sea. He figured he could survive in it for a good 10 hours before he used up all the air, provided he didn't exercise too much. The port cops could probe his container all they wanted, and they'd get the normal mix of volatiles boiling off of the paint on the inside of the shipping container, untainted by human exhaust. Provided they didn't actually open his container and then get too curious about the hermetically sealed box inside. He'd be golden. Anyway, by the time he was done, he had a genuinely kick-ass little nest. He'd loaded up his dad's Huawei with an entire apartment's worth of IKEA furniture, and then he'd hacked it and nailed it and screwed it and glued it into the container's interior, making a cozy ship's cabin with a king-sized bed, a chemical toilet, a microwave, a desk, and a play area. Once they were at sea, he could open his little hatch and string out his Wi-Fi receiver. Tapping into the onboard Wi-Fi used by the crew would be simple, as they didn't devote a lot of energy to keeping out freeloaders while they were in the middle of the ocean, and his solar panel. He had some very long wires for both, because he'd fixed the waybills so that his container would be deep in the middle of the stack alongside one of the gaps that ran between them, rather than on the outside edge. 1% of shipping containers ended up at the bottom of the sea, tossed overboard in rough waters, and he wanted to minimize the chance of dying when his container imploded from the pressure of hundreds of atmospheres worth of deep ocean. Inheritances were handier than he'd suspected. He was able to click onto Huawei's website and order 10 power packs for their all-electric runabouts, each one rated for 80 miles drive. They were delivered directly to the pier his shipping container was waiting on. He considered the possibility that the power packs had been shipped to America in the same container he was installing them in, but he knew the odds against it were astronomical. There were a lot of shipping containers arriving on America's shores every second. They stacked neatly at one end of the container, with a barcoded waybill pasted to them that said they were being returned as defective. They arrived charged, and he was pretty sure that he'd be able to keep them charged between the port of Los Angeles and Shenzhen, using the solar sheets he was going to deploy on the top of the container stack. He'd tested the photovoltaic sheets on his father's Huawei and found that he could fully charge it in 6 hours, and he'd calculated that he should be able to run his laptop, air conditioner, and water pumps for 4 days on each stack. 16 days' power would be more than enough to complete the crossing, even if they got hit by bad weather, but it was good to know that recharging was an option. Water had given him some pause. Humans consume a lot of water, and while there was plenty of room in his space capsule, as he'd come to think of the container, he thought there had to be a better way to manage his liquid needs on the voyage than simply moving 3 or 4 tons of water into the box. He was deep in thought when he realized that the solar sheets were all waterproof and could be easily turned into a funnel that would feed a length of PVC pipe that he could snake from the top of the container stack into the space capsule, where a couple of sterile hollow drums would hold the water until he was ready to drink it or shower in it. Afterwards, his wastewater could just be pumped out onto the ship's deck, where it would wash overboard with all the other water that fell on the ship. If he packed enough water to keep him going on minimal showers and cooking for a week, the odds were good that they'd hit a rainstorm and he'd be topped up, and if they didn't, he could ration his remaining water and arrive in China a little smellier than he'd started. He loved this stuff. The planning was exquisite fun, a real Google fest of interesting HOWTOs and advice. Lots of parts of the problem of self-sufficiency at sea had been considered before this, though no one had given much thought to the problem of traveling in style and secrecy in a container. He was a pioneer. He was making notes and planning to publish them when the adventure was over. Of course, he wouldn't mention the reason he needed to smuggle himself into China, rather than just applying for a tourist visa. Wei Dong's mother didn't know what to make of her son. His father's death had shattered her, and half the time she seemed to be speaking to him from behind a curtain of gauze. He found the antidepressants her doctor had prescribed and looked up the side effects and decided that his mother probably wouldn't be in any shape to notice that he was up to something weird. Mostly she just seemed relieved to have him home, and industriously involved in the family business. She hadn't even blinked when he told her he was going to take a road trip up the coast, a nice long drive up to Alaska with minimal net access, phone activity and so on. The last cargo to go into the space capsule was 3 cardboard boxes, small enough to load into the trunk of the Huawei, which he put in long-term parking and double-locked after he'd loaded them up. Each one was triple-wrapped in waterproof plastic, and inside them were 25,000-odd prepaid game cards for various MMOs. The face value of these cards was in excess of $200, though no money changed hands when he collected them, in lots of a few hundred, from Chinese convenience stores all over Los Angeles and Orange County. It had taken 3 days to get the whole load, and it had been the hairiest part of the gig so far. The cards were part of a regular deal whereby the big gold farmers used networks of overseas retailers to snaffle up U.S. playtime and ship it back to China, so that their employees could get online using the U.S. servers. Technically, that meant that all the convenience store clerks he visited were part of a vast criminal underground, but none of them seemed all that dangerous. Still, if any one of them had been suspicious about the white kid with the bad Mandarin accent who was doing the regular pickup, who knew what might happen? It hadn't, though. Now he had the precious cargo, the boxes of untraceable, non-sequential game credit that would let him earn game gold. It was all so weird. Now that he sat there on his red leather IKEA sofa, sipping an iced tea and munching a power bar and contemplating his booty. Under their scratch-off strips. These cards contained unique numbers produced by a big random number generator on a server in America, then printed in China, then shipped back to America, now destined for China again. He thought about how much simpler it would have been to come up with the random numbers in China in the first place, and chuckled and put his feet up on the boxes. Of course, if they'd done that, he wouldn't have had any excuse to build the space capsule and smuggle himself into China. This scene is dedicated to London's Clerkenwell Tales, located around the corner from my office in Clerkenwell, a wonderful and eclectic neighbourhood in central London. Peter Ho, the owner, is a veteran of Waterstones, and has opened up exactly the kind of small, expertly curated neighborhood store that every bookish person yearns to have in the vicinity. Peter makes a point of stocking small handmade editions from local printers, and as a result, I'm forever dropping in to say hello over my lunch break and leaving with an armload of exquisite and gorgeous books. It's lethal. In a good way. Clerkenwell Tales. 30 Exmouth Market EC1R4QE London +44 020 7713 8135. Ashok did his best thinking on paper, big sheets of it. He knew that it was ridiculous. The smart thing to do would be to keep all the files digital, encrypted on a shared drive on the net where all the Webleys could get at it. But the numbers made so much more sense when they were written neatly on flip chart paper and tacked up all around the walls of his war room, the back room at Mrs. Dibayendu's cafe, rented by Mala out of the army's wages from Mr. Banerjee. Oh yes. Mala was still drawing wages from Mr. Banerjee and her soldiers were still fighting the missions he sent them on. But afterwards, in their own time. They fought their own missions, in Mrs. Dibayendu's shop. Mrs. Dibayendu was lavishly welcoming to them, grateful for the business in her shop, which had been in danger of drying up and blowing away. Idiot nephew had been sent back to Uttar Pradesh to live with his parents, limping home with his tail between his legs and leaving Mrs. Dibayendu to tend her increasingly empty shop on her own. Mrs. Dibayendu didn't mind the big sheets of paper. She loved Ashok, smartly dressed and well turned out, and clearly thought that he and Yasmin had something going on. Ashok tried gently to disabuse her of this, but she wasn't having any of it. She brought him sweet chai all day and all night, as he labored over his sheets. Ashok, Mala called, limping toward him through the empty cafe, leaning on the trestle tables that supported the long rows of gasping PCs. He stood up from the table, wiping the chai from his chin with his hand, wiping his hand on his trousers. Mala made him nervous. He'd visited her in the hospital, with Yasmin, and sat by her bed while she refused to look at either of them. He'd picked her up when she was discharged, and she'd fixed him with that burning look, like a holy woman, and she'd nodded once at him, and asked him how her army could help. Mala, he said. You're early. Not much fighting today, she said, shrugging. Fighting Webleys is like fighting children. Badly organized children. We knocked over 20 job sites before lunch and I had to call a break. The army was getting bored. I've got them on training exercises, fighting battles against each other. You're the commander. General Robotwala. I'm sure you know best. She had a very pretty smile. Mala did, though you rarely got to see it. Mostly you saw her ugly smiles, smiles that seemed to have too many sharp teeth in them. But her pretty smile was like the sun. It changed the whole room, made your heart glow. He understood how a girl like this could command an army. He stared at the pretty smile for a minute and his tongue went dry and thick in his mouth. I want to talk to you. Ashok. You're sitting here with your paper and your figures, and you keep telling us to wait a little, and you'll explain everything. It's been months. Ashok, and still you say wait, explain. I'm tired of waiting. The army is tired of waiting. Being double agents was amusing for a little while, and it's fun to fight real Pinkertons at night, but they are not going to wait around forever. Ashok held his hands out in a placating gesture that often worked on Mala. She needed to know that she was the boss. Look, it's not a simple matter. If we're going to take on 4 virtual worlds at once, everything has to run like clockwork, each piece firing after the other. In the meantime, ... She waved at him dismissively. In the meantime, Banerjee grows more and more suspicious. The man is an idiot. Not a moron. He will eventually figure out that something is going wrong. Or his masters will. And then ... And then we'll have to placate him, or misdirect him. General, this is a confidence game, a scam, running on 4 virtual worlds and 20 real nations, with hundreds of confederates. Confidence games require planning and cunning. It's not enough to go in, guns blazing. ... You think we don't understand planning. You think we don't understand cunning. Ashok, you have never fought. You should fight. It would help you understand this business you've gotten into. You think that we're thugs. Idiot muscle. Running a battle requires as much skill as anything you do. I don't have a fine education. I am just a girl from the village. I am just a Dharavi rat, but I am smart Ashok, and don't you ever forget it. The worst part was, she was right. He did often think of her as a thug. Mala. I want to play, but playing would take me away from planning. You can't plan if you don't play. I'm the general, and I'm ordering it. You'll join the junior platoon on maneuvers tomorrow at 10 a.m. There's skirmishing. Then theory. Then a couple of battles overseen by the senior platoon when they arrive. It will be good for you. They will rag you some, because you are new, but that will be good for you, too. That look in her eyes, the fiery one, told him that he didn't dare disagree. Yes, General, he said. And you will explain this business to me. Now. You will learn my world. I will learn yours. Mala. I know. I came in and shouted at you because you were taking too long and now I insist that you take longer. She gave him that smile. She wasn't pretty, her features were too sharp for pretty, but she was beautiful when she smiled. She was going to be a heartbreaker when she grew up. If she grew up. Yes. General. Chai, she called to Mrs. Dibayendu, who brought it round quickly, averting her eyes from Mala. All right. Let's start with the basic theory of the scam. Who is easiest to trick? A fool, she said at once. Wrong, he said. Fools are often suspicious, because they've been taken advantage of. The easiest person to trick is a successful person, the more successful the better. Why is that? Mala thought. They have more money, so it's worth tricking them. Ashok waggled his chin. No sorry, by that reasoning, they should be more suspicious. Not less. Mala scraped a chair over the floor and sat down and made a face at him. I give up, tell me. It's because if a man is successful at doing one thing, he's apt to assume that he'll be successful at anything. He believes he's a Brahmin, divinely gifted with the wisdom and strength of character to succeed. He can't bear the thought that he just got lucky, or that his parents just got lucky and left him a pile of rupees. He can't stand the thought that understanding physics or computers or cameras doesn't make him an expert on economics or beekeeping or cookery. And his intelligence and his pride work together to make him easier to trick. His pride, naturally, but his intelligence, too. He's smart enough to understand that there are lots of ways to get rich. If you tell him a complex tale about how some market works and can be tricked, he can follow along over rough territory that would lose a dumber man. And there's a third reason that successful men are easier to trick than fools: they dread being shown up as a fool. When you trick them, you can trick them again, make them believe that the scheme fell through. They don't want to go to the police or tell their friends, because if word gets out that some mighty and powerful man was tricked, he stands to lose his reputation, without which he cannot recover his fortune. Mala waggled her chin. It all makes sense. I suppose. It does, Ashok said. I am a successful and powerful person, she said. Her eyes were cat slits. You are, Ashok said, more cautiously. So I would be easier to fool than any of the fools in my army. Ashok laughed. You are so sharp. General, it's a wonder you don't cut yourself. Yes, it's possible that all of this is a giant triple twist bluff, aimed at fooling you. But what would I want to fool you for? As rich as your army has made you, you must know that I could be just as rich by working as a junior lecturer in economics at IIT. But General, at the end of the day, you either trust me or you don't. I can't prove to you that you're inside the scheme rather than its target. If you want out, that's fine. It will hurt the plan, but it won't be its death. There's a lot of people involved here. Mala smiled her sunny smile. You are a clever man, she said. And for now, I will trust you. Go on. Let's step back a little. Do you want to learn some history? Will it help me understand why you're taking so long? I think so, he said. I think it's a bloody good story, in any case. She made a go-on gesture and sipped her chai, her back very erect, her bearing regal. Back in the 1930s, the biggest confidence jobs were called the big store. They were little stage plays in which there was only one audience member, the mark or victim. Everyone else was in the play. The mark would meet a roper on a train, who would feel him out to see if he had any money. He'd sometimes give him a little taste of the money to be made, maybe they'd share some mysterious found money that he'd planted. That sort of thing makes the mark trust you more, and also puts him in your power, because now you know that he's willing to cheat a little. Once the train pulled into the strange city and the mark got off, every single person he met or talked with would be part of the trick. If the mark was good at finance, the roper would hand him off to a partner, the inside man, who would tell him about a scam he had for winning horse races, if the mark was good at horse races. The scam would be about fixing the stock market. In other words, whatever the mark knew the least about, that was the center of the game. The mark would be shown a betting parlor or a stockbroker's office filled with bustling, active people, so many people that it was impossible to believe that they could all be part of a scam. Then he'd have the deal explained to him. The brokerage house or betting parlor got its figures from a telegraph office, this was before computers, that would phone in the results. The mark would then be shown the telegraph office, another totally fake business, and meet a friend of the inside man who was willing to delay the results by a few minutes, giving them to the roper and the market just quick enough to let them get their bets or buys down. They'd know the winners before the office did, so they'd be betting on a sure thing. And they'd try it, and it would work. The mark could put a few dollars down and walk away with a few hundred. It was an eye-popping experience, a real thrill. The mark's imagination would start to work on him. If he could turn a few dollars into hundreds, imagine what he could do if he could put down all his money, along with whatever money he could steal from his business, his family, his friends, everyone. It wouldn't even be stealing, because he'd be able to pay everyone back once he won big. And he'd go and get all the money he could lay hands on, and he'd lay his bet and he'd lose. And it would be his fault. The inside man wouldn't be able to believe it. He'd said, "Bet on this horse in the first race, not bet on this horse for first place," or some similar misunderstanding. The mark's bad hearing had cost them everything, all of them. There is a giant scene, and before you know it, the police are there, ready to arrest everyone. Someone shoots the policeman. There's blood and screaming. The place empties out, and the mark counts himself lucky to have escaped with his life. Of course, all the blood and shooting are fakes, too, so is the policeman. He's got a little blood in a bag in his mouth. They called it a cackle bladder, a fine word. No, now, at this stage, it may be that the mark is completely, totally broke. Not one paisa to his name. If that's the case, he gets away and never hears from the roper or the inside man again. He spends the rest of his life broke and broken, hating himself for having misheard the instruction at the critical moment. And he never, ever tells anyone, because if he did, it would expose this great man for a fool. But if there's any chance he can get more money, a friend he hasn't cleaned out, a company bank account he can access, they may contact him again and offer him the chance to get even. You can bet he will, after all. He's a king among men. Destined to rule, who made his fortune because he's better than everyone else. Why wouldn't he play again, since the only reason he lost last time was that he misheard an instruction? Surely that won't happen again. But it does, she said. Her eyes were shining. Oh yes, indeed. And again, and again. And again, until he's been bled dry. You've learned the first lesson. Ashok said. Now, onto advanced subjects. You know how a pyramid scheme works, yes? She waved dismissively. Of course. Now, the pyramid scheme is just a kind of skeleton, and like a skeleton, you can hang a lot of different bodies off of it. It can look like a plan to sell soap, or a plan to sell vitamins, or something else altogether. But the important thing is, whatever it's selling, it has to seem like a good deal. Think back on the big store, how do you make something seem like a good deal? Mala thought carefully. Ashok could practically see the gears spinning in her head. Wah! She was smart, this Dharavi girl. Okay, she said. Okay, it should be something the mark doesn't know much about. Got it in one. Ashok said. If the mark is smart and accomplished, she'll assume that she knows everything about everything. Dangle some bait for her that she doesn't really understand and she'll come along. But there's a way to make even familiar subjects unfamiliar. Here, look at this. He typed at the disused computer on a corner of his desk, Googled an image of a craps table at a casino. This is a gambling game, craps. They play it with dice. I've seen men playing it in the street, Mala said. This is the casino version. See all the lines and markings. She nodded. These marks represent different bets, double if it comes up this way, triple if it comes up that way. The bets can get very, very complicated. Now, dice aren't that complicated. There are only 36 ways that a roll can come up, 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, and so on, all that way up to 6-6. It should be easy to tell whether a bet is any good. Take the chance of rolling 2 sixes. Twice in a row, the odds are 36 times 36 to 1. If the bet pays less than those odds, then you will eventually lose money. If the bet pays more than those odds, then you will eventually win money. Mala shook her head. I don't really understand. Imagine flipping a coin. He took out his wallet and opened a flap and pulled out an old brass Chinese coin, pierced in the center with a square. One side is heads, one side is tails. Assuming the coin is fair, that is, assuming that both sides of the coin weigh the same and have the same wind resistance, then the chances of a coin landing with either face showing are 50-50, or 1 in 1, or just even. Now we play a fair game. I toss the coin, you call out which side you think it'll land on. If you guess right, you double your bet, if not, I take your money. If we play this game long enough, we'll both have the same amount of money as we started with. It's a boring game. But what if instead I paid you triple if it landed on heads, provided you took the heads bet? All you need to do is keep putting money on heads.